The text came through at 9:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. Mom, Uncle Richard passed away last night. Funeral is Saturday. Will reading is Monday at 2 p.m. I stared at my phone screen in the empty staff lounge at Seattle General Hospital, where I'd just finished a 12-hour shift in the cardiac unit. My hands started shaking. Uncle Richard. Dead. I'd spoken to him 3 days ago. Our usual Tuesday evening call. He'd sounded tired but fine, complaining about the Mariners pitching like always. We talked about his garden, about the book he was reading, about absolutely nothing important. The way we always did. You okay? My coworker Lisa touched my shoulder. My uncle died, I said quietly. Oh, Emma. I'm so sorry. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. I excused myself and went to my car, where I sat in the parking garage and cried for 20 minutes. Uncle Richard had been 78. I'd known this day would come eventually. Knowing didn't make it hurt less. My phone buzzed again. Mom, don't expect anything at the will reading. He barely knew. We were his real family. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I blocked out the pain and drove home to my small apartment in Capitol Hill, the one Mom loved to mention whenever she wanted to remind me that my older sister Melissa lived in a 4-bedroom house in Bellevue. The funeral was exactly what I expected. Mom and Dad arrived early in expensive black. Melissa came with her husband Brandon and their 2 kids. Kyle showed up late, reeking of cologne. I'd arrived an hour early to be alone with Uncle Richard before everyone else. The service was brief. The pastor spoke in generic platitudes. Melissa cried loudly. Mom dabbed her eyes. Dad stood stoic. I didn't cry. I'd already cried. Instead, I thought about Tuesday evenings. At the reception afterward, held at Mom and Dad's house in Medina, the family gathered in clusters. I stood alone by the window holding a cup of coffee I didn't want. Emma. Mom approached, her voice low. We need to discuss Monday. The will reading. Yes. She glanced around, then moved closer. Your father and I have been thinking. Richard's estate is substantial. The house alone is worth at least $1 million, and he had investments, savings. We're talking significant money. Okay. We were his immediate family. Your father is his only sibling. It's only natural that the bulk of the estate would go to us, with portions for you kids. I said nothing. But you should understand, Mom continued, that Richard barely knew you, Emma. You visited him, a few times a year. Every Tuesday for 6 years, I thought. But you didn't know that. We were the ones who really cared for him, Mom said. We were his real family. So when the will is read on Monday, don't expect anything significant. Maybe a small token amount. That would be appropriate. Okay, I said quietly. Dad joined us, drink in hand. Emma. Your mother's right. Richard and I were close. Brothers. You understand how inheritance works. It goes to immediate family first. When was the last time you saw him? I asked. Dad frowned. What? When was the last time you saw Uncle Richard? Before he died. Christmas, Dad said. We had him over for Christmas dinner. 8 months ago. They'd had him over for 4 hours on Christmas Day. I'd been there too. Uncle Richard had looked uncomfortable the entire time, surrounded by expensive decorations and expensive food and expensive people discussing expensive things. He seemed fine then, Mom added. Healthy. This was very sudden. It wasn't sudden. Uncle Richard had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure 2 years ago. I'd taken him to every cardiology appointment. I'd picked up his medications. I'd helped him understand his treatment plan, using my nursing background to translate the medical jargon. But my family didn't know any of that. Melissa appeared with a glass of white wine. Are we talking about the will reading? Yes, Mom said. I was just explaining to Emma not to expect much. Obviously the house will go to Mom and Dad, Melissa said. They can sell it and use the money for retirement. The rest should probably be split among us kids. Fair and equal. We'll see what Richard decided, Dad said carefully. Did he have a will? Kyle asked, joining our circle. Of course he did, Mom said. He was very organized. His lawyer called to schedule the reading. Everyone named in the will has to attend. Everyone? I asked. You, me, your father, Melissa, Kyle, Mom listed. And a few others, I assume. Probably some charities. Richard was sentimental like that. Sentimental. They thought Uncle Richard was sentimental. Uncle Richard was practical, logical, direct. He didn't believe in wasting time or money. He'd worked as a structural engineer for 40 years, retiring at 65 with a solid pension and smart investments. He'd bought his house in Ballard in 1982 for $95,000. It was now worth $1.2 million. I knew all this because we talked about it every Tuesday for 6 years. But my family thought he was just a sentimental old man who handed out candy to his nieces and nephews at Christmas. The reception wound down. I helped clean up as I always did while Melissa supervised and Mom directed. Dad retreated to his office. Kyle left early, claiming he had plans. "See you Monday," Mom said as I was leaving. 2:00. "Don't be late." "And Emma?" He touched my arm. "Try to dress professionally. This is important." I drove home thinking about the first time I'd really talked to Uncle Richard. I'd been 24, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in student debt. I went to his house to drop off something Mom had asked me to deliver. Uncle Richard had invited me in for coffee. We talked for 3 hours. He was funny, but intelligent. He asked about my work, really asked. He listened to my answers. No one else ever asked me about work. Before I left, Uncle Richard said, "You should come back next week. I make pretty good coffee." I came back, and kept coming back. Every Tuesday evening for 6 years straight. He became my best friend. And no one in my family knew. They knew I visited Uncle Richard sometimes. Mom would mention it occasionally, usually as a criticism. "You should spend less time with that old man and more time building your career. Or find a boyfriend instead of wasting your evenings." But they never asked what we talked about. They never asked why I went. They assumed I was just being nice to a lonely old relative. They had no idea that Uncle Richard had been the only person in my family who actually knew me. Monday arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. I took the day off work. I dressed in my best professional clothes. Black pants, white blouse, blazer. The outfit I'd bought for job interviews but rarely wore. The law office was in downtown Seattle on the 34th floor of a sleek glass building. The waiting room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Mom and Dad were already there when I arrived at 1:55 p.m., sitting on a leather sofa talking quietly. Melissa and Brandon sat across from them. Kyle was on his phone in the corner. "Emma." Mom stood. "Finally. We were worried you'd be late." "It's 1:55. The meeting is at 2. Early is on time is late," Mom said, one of her favorite phrases. The receptionist smiled at me. "You must be Emma Chin. Mr. Hartwell is expecting you. You can all go in now." We filed into a large conference room. Dark wood table, leather chairs, law books lining the walls. Very official. Very intimidating. A man in his 60s stood as we entered. "Good afternoon. I'm Robert Hartwell, Richard Chen's estate attorney. Please everyone have a seat." We arranged ourselves around the table. Mom and Dad sat at one end, the power position. Melissa and Brandon beside them. Kyle across from them. I sat at the far end, as far from everyone as possible. Mr. Hartwell opened a leather portfolio. "First, let me express my condolences. Richard was a wonderful man. I had the pleasure of working with him for over 20 years. Mom nodded graciously. "Thank you. He spoke highly of you." Had he? I'd never heard Uncle Richard mention his lawyer. "Before we begin," Mr. Hartwell said, "I want to clarify a few things. This will was executed 18 months ago in March of last year. Richard was of completely sound mind. The will was witnessed by 2 unrelated parties and notarized. It is legally binding." "Of course," Dad said. Richard also left instructions that I was to read the will in its entirety, with no interruptions, and then answer questions afterward. I'd appreciate everyone's cooperation with that. We all nodded. Mr. Hartwell put on reading glasses. "The last will and testament of Richard Michael Chin, executed March 15, 2024. He read through the opening legal language, declarations that Uncle Richard was of sound mind, that this superseded all previous wills, that he appointed Mr. Hartwell as executor. Then he reached the bequest. To my brother Daniel Chin and his wife Patricia Chin, I leave the sum of $5,000 each for a total of $10,000. Silence. Mom's face froze. To my niece Melissa Chin Morrison, I leave the sum of $5,000. Melissa's mouth opened. What? Please hold questions until the end, Mr. Hartwell said gently. To my nephew Kyle Chin, I leave the sum of $5,000. Kyle put his phone down, looking confused. The entirety of my remaining estate, Mr. Hartwell continued, including my residence at 4728 Sunset Avenue, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, retirement accounts, personal property, and any other assets not specifically mentioned above, I leave to my niece Emma Louise Chin. The room went completely silent. I couldn't breathe. The estate has been valued at approximately $3.2 million, Mr. Hartwell said, still reading. This includes the Ballard residence valued at $1.2 million, investment accounts totaling $1.7 million, savings and checking accounts of $200,000, and personal property and vehicles valued at approximately $100,000. Mom's face had gone white. Chilly white. Richard also left a letter to be read at this time, Mr. Hartwell said. He pulled out an envelope. To my family and to Emma, this letter explains my decision. He opened it and began reading in Uncle Richard's voice. Practical, direct, no wasted words. To my brother Dan and his wife Patricia. You are good people. You worked hard, built successful careers, raised 3 children. I'm proud of you. But let's be honest with each other. You visited me once a year at Christmas. You called on my birthday and major holidays. That's fine. I don't fault you for it. You had busy lives. To Melissa, you're ambitious and driven. You've built a beautiful life. The few times you visited, you were polite but distracted, always checking your phone, always rushing to leave. That's okay. I understand. To Kyle, you're young and figuring out your path. The handful of times you came by, it was because your mother made you. You were bored the entire time. I don't blame you for that either. Here's the thing though. For the past 6 years, Emma has come to my house every single Tuesday evening. 6 to 8 p.m. Like clockwork. He never missed. Not once. She came when she was exhausted from 12-hour hospital shifts. He came when she was sick with the flu herself. She came during snowstorms and heat waves. She came when she had her own problems and worries. She didn't come because she had to. He came because she wanted to. We drank coffee. We talked. About everything. She told me about her patients, about the challenges of being a nurse, about her dreams of maybe becoming a nurse practitioner someday. I told her about my career, about engineering, about your mother, her grandmother, who died before Emma was born. She listened to my stories. She laughed at my jokes. He cared about my opinions. When I was diagnosed with heart failure 2 years ago, Emma took me to every appointment. She made sure I understood my medications. He helped me modify my diet. She checked on me between our Tuesday visits, calling to make sure I was okay. She did this while working full-time, while dealing with her own challenges, while being dismissed and overlooked by her own family. None of you knew any of this. You didn't know because you never asked. You assumed Emma was just being nice, that she visited, sometimes, that she was wasting her time with a boring old man. But Emma saw me. Actually saw me. Not as an obligation or a burden or a source of future inheritance. As a person. A friend. She gave me something precious in my final years. Her time and her genuine care. That's worth more than money can measure. So I'm leaving her the money. To Dan, Patricia, Melissa and Kyle, your $5,000 bequests are not insults. They're acknowledgments. You're family. I loved you. But Emma earned this inheritance through 6 years of showing up, consistently and selflessly. If you're angry about this decision, I understand. But ask yourselves, when was the last time you spent 2 hours with me just talking? When was the last time you asked about my life, my thoughts, my fears? Emma asked. Every Tuesday. For 6 years. That matters. With love and no regrets, Richard Chin. Mr. Hartwell set down the letter. The silence in the room was suffocating. I had tears running down my face. I couldn't stop them. This is insane, Melissa said. Her voice was shaking. This isn't legal. He was clearly manipulated. I assure you, Mr. Hartwell interrupted calmly, the will is completely legal and valid. Richard was evaluated by his physician 3 weeks before executing this will. The doctor certified that he was of sound mind and not under any undue influence. She's a nurse. Mom's voice was sharp. He had access to him. She could have. Mrs. Chin. Mr. Hartwell's voice was firm now. I'm going to stop you right there. Any allegations of impropriety could expose you to legal liability. Richard made this decision freely and clearly. I was present when he executed the will. I spoke with him at length about it. He was absolutely certain. But $3 million, Dad said. He looked stunned. That's, Richard, we're your family. Your brother. And Emma is your daughter, Mr. Hartwell said quietly. Richard's niece. Also family. This is different, Mom insisted. She spent a few hours a week with him. We spent decades. With respect, Mrs. Chin, what matters is not the history but the present. Richard makes that clear in his letter. Emma was present during his final years. That's what he valued. Kyle was staring at me. You never told us. About the Tuesday visits. You never asked, I said softly. 3.2 million, Melissa said. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure fury. You manipulated an old man. Melissa. Brandon put his hand on her arm, but she shook it off. No. This is fraud. We're contesting this. We have to. That is your right, Mr. Hartwell said. However, I must warn you that any contest will be expensive and, in my professional opinion, doomed to fail. Richard anticipated this possibility. He left detailed documentation. Phone records showing Emma's daily check-in calls. Visitor logs from his doctor's appointments showing Emma attended every single one while none of you attended any. Receipts for medications, groceries, and care items that Emma purchased for him. Testimony from neighbors who only ever saw Emma visiting. He pulled out a thick folder. Richard was an engineer. He documented everything. If you contest this will, all of this evidence will be presented in court. It will show quite clearly that Emma provided years of care while the rest of the family provided minimal contact. Mom's face was red now. We had busy lives. Careers. Responsibilities. So did Emma, Mr. Hartwell said. She's a full-time cardiac nurse. She still found time. How long would a contest take? Dad asked. He sounded tired. 6 months to a year typically. Legal fees would likely run $25,000 to $50,000. And again, based on the evidence, you would almost certainly lose. The court would likely award Emma her legal fees as well, meaning you'd be responsible for those costs on top of your own. So we're just supposed to accept this? Melissa demanded. That's your decision to make, Mr. Hartwell said. But yes, I would strongly advise accepting it. He turned to me. Emma, do you have any questions? I wiped my eyes. When did he decide this? To leave everything to me. We discussed it about 2 years ago, shortly after his diagnosis. He'd been thinking about it for a while. He told me he wanted to ensure the person who actually cared for him would benefit, not just the people who assumed they'd inherit because of a family tree. He never said anything to me. He didn't want it to affect your visits. He wanted to make sure you were coming for him, not for an inheritance. Though he told me he knew that was never your motivation. Fresh tears spilled over. Uncle Richard had known. Of course he had. He'd known I loved him. That I came every Tuesday because I wanted to, not because I expected anything. This is bullshit, Kyle muttered. Kyle. Mom snapped. What? Is? Emma gets $3 million because she drank coffee with the guy. She did considerably more than that, Mr. Hartwell said. But regardless, this is Richard's decision to make. It was his money. His estate. His choice. What happens now? Dad asked. The estate will go through probate, which typically takes 4 to 6 months. As executor, I'll manage that process. Emma will inherit the house and all assets once probate is complete. The $5,000 bequests to each of you will be distributed first, within 30 days. $5,000, Melissa laughed bitterly. After all the years. All the years of what? I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. All the years of visiting once? Of calling on holidays? Of treating him like an obligation? How dare you, Mom said. I'm not saying it to be cruel. My voice was steady now. But Uncle Richard was right. You barely knew him. None of you did. You knew he existed. You knew he was family. But you didn't know him. And you did. Melissa challenged. Yes. I knew his favorite book was Lonesome Dove. I knew he cried when his wife died 20 years ago and never really got over it. I knew he was scared of dying alone. I knew he loved the Mariners but thought they'd never win a World Series. I knew he voted for Democrats even though his engineering colleagues all thought he was crazy. I knew he wanted to visit Japan but never did because Aunt Lily died before they could take the trip. I looked around the table. Did any of you know any of that? Silence. He was just Uncle Richard, Kyle said defensively. The old guy we saw at Christmas. Exactly. And that's fine. You had your own lives. I'm not judging you for that. But don't be angry with me because I actually spent time with him. You're taking advantage of an old man's loneliness, Mom said coldly. No. I was giving him companionship. There's a difference. Mr. Hartwell closed his portfolio. Unless there are legal questions, I think we're finished here. Emma, please call my office tomorrow and we'll begin the probate process. Everyone else, you'll receive your bequests within 30 days. We all stood. The silence was crushing. In the elevator down, no one spoke. We were all crammed together in the small space, not looking at each other. When we reached the lobby, Mom turned to me. If you had any decency, you'd split that money with your family. No, I said. No. Uncle Richard left it to me. He explained why. I'm going to honor his decision. You're being selfish, Melissa said. Maybe. Or maybe I earned it. Either way, it's mine now. I walked away from them out into the Seattle afternoon. My phone started buzzing before I'd even reached my car. Melissa, you're destroying this family. Kyle, this is so messed up. Mom, we need to talk about this reasonably. Dad, Emma, call me. I didn't respond to any of them. That night I drove to Uncle Richard's house. My house now, I suppose, though that felt impossible to process. It was a small craftsman bungalow with a covered front porch. The garden Uncle Richard had tended for 40 years was overgrown now. He'd been too weak to maintain it these last few months. I used the key he'd given me 2 years ago. In case of emergency, he'd said. You're my emergency contact. You should have a key. The house smelled like him. Coffee and Old Spice and old books. I stood in the living room and cried. Everything was exactly as it had been last Tuesday. The coffee maker I'd used to make our evening coffee. The 2 mugs in the sink still unwashed. The book he'd been reading, bookmark halfway through. The photo albums on the shelf. Uncle Richard's entire life, documented in pictures. I pulled one down and flipped through it. Uncle Richard and Aunt Lily on their wedding day. Uncle Richard at his college graduation. Uncle Richard and Dad as kids, maybe 7 and 10, grinning at the camera. Toward the back, recent photos. Most of them were of Uncle Richard alone. At his garden at the park, reading on his porch. Then I found a section of photos I hadn't known existed. Photos of me and Uncle Richard. Someone must have taken them, maybe a neighbor. Us sitting on the porch drinking coffee. Us at the kitchen table both laughing at something. Us in his garden, me holding a watering can while he pointed at a plant. He'd kept photos of our Tuesdays. I sat on his couch, my couch, and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The next 2 weeks were brutal. My family called constantly. Mom wanted to have a family meeting to discuss fair distribution. Melissa left voicemails accusing me of manipulation and greed. Dad sent long emails about family obligation and doing the right thing. Kyle just sent angry text. I didn't respond. I went to work. I did my job. I came home. I ignored my phone. Mr. Hartwell called to walk me through the probate process. He was kind and patient, explaining everything clearly. You're handling this well, he told me. Richard would be proud. My family hates me. They're upset. They expected something different. But that's not your fault, Emma. You didn't manipulate anyone. You were just present. That's all Richard wanted. Someone to be present. 3 weeks after the will reading, Mom showed up at my apartment. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door. I let her in because I was too tired to fight. She sat on my worn couch in my small apartment and looked around with barely concealed disdain. You're really going to keep living here? You're about to inherit millions. I haven't inherited anything yet. Probate takes months. Emma. She leaned forward. Be reasonable. That money should go to the family. All of us. Richard was confused at the end. He didn't understand what he was doing. He wasn't confused. He was very clear. You manipulated him. I visited him. Every week. For 6 years. That's not manipulation. That's showing up. You knew he had money. Actually, I didn't. Not exactly. We never discussed his finances in detail. I knew he owned his house. I knew he had a pension. But I didn't know about the investments or the exact amounts. And I didn't care. I don't believe you. I know you don't. But it's true. I visited Uncle Richard because I liked him. Because he was my friend. Because every Tuesday evening for 2 hours, I had someone who actually listened to me. Mom flinched. We listen to you. No, Mom, you don't. You never have. When's the last time you asked about my job? Really asked, wanted details? You're a nurse. You work at a hospital. I'm a cardiac care nurse. I specialize in post-surgical recovery. I've been thinking about going back to school to become a nurse practitioner. Did you know that? Mom was silent. I've been thinking about it for 2 years. I've mentioned it. But you've never asked about it. You're always too busy telling me about Melissa's kitchen renovation or your golf club drama. That's not fair. It's completely fair. And it's fine, Mom. I stopped expecting you to be interested in my life years ago. But don't be surprised that I formed a close relationship with someone who was interested. So this is our fault? This isn't about fault. This is about choices. Uncle Richard chose to leave his money to me. I'm choosing to accept it. You're choosing to be angry about it. Those are all choices we're making. $3 million, Emma. I know. That could change all our lives. It's going to change my life. That's what Uncle Richard wanted. Mom stood. If you go through with this, your family will never forgive you. Then I guess my family will never forgive me. She left without another word. 4 weeks after the will reading, Melissa showed up with a lawyer. They came to my apartment on a Saturday morning. I was still in my pajamas, having worked a night shift. This is my attorney, Michael Brennan, Melissa announced. We're filing a contest to Richard's will. Mr. Brennan looked uncomfortable. Ms. Chin, my client believes there are grounds to challenge the will on the basis of undue influence. Hey, I said. I was too tired for this. We'd like to propose a settlement, he continued. Rather than going through expensive litigation, we're prepared to offer you a generous amount if you'll agree to split the estate more equitably. How equitably? 40% to you, 60% split among the other family members. I did the math. That would give me about $1.3 million. They'd split nearly $2 million. No, I said. Emma, be reasonable, Melissa said. We're being more than fair. Uncle Richard was clear about what he wanted. I'm not negotiating against his wishes. We will win in court, Mr. Brennan said, though he didn't sound confident. The evidence of undue influence is compelling. What evidence? You had exclusive access to Richard. You isolated him from his family. You're a medical professional who could have manipulated his medications or mental state. I'd like you both to leave now, I said calmly. Emma. Leave. Or I'll call the police and report you for harassment. They left. 2 hours later, I received a call from Mr. Hartwell. Your sister has filed a will contest, he said. I expected this. Don't worry. Should I be worried? No. Frankly, they have no case. I spoke with their attorney. He knows it too. He's doing this because Melissa is paying him to. But it will fail. How long will it take? 4 to 6 months for the court hearing. The judge will review the evidence and make a ruling. Based on what we have, I'm confident we'll prevail. And if they lose? They'll be responsible for their own legal fees, likely $25,000 or more. And the judge may award you your legal fees as well, which they'd have to pay. Total cost to them could be $50,000 or more. That seems like a waste of money. It is. But sometimes people need to learn lessons the expensive way. 5 months later, we sat in King County Superior Court. Judge Margaret Fisher presided. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. Melissa's attorney, Mr. Brennan, presented their case. He argued that I'd had unusual access to Uncle Richard. That I'd isolated him from his family. That as a medical professional I could have influenced his mental state. He had no evidence of any of this. Just speculation and insinuation. Then Mr. Hartwell presented our case. He had phone records showing I'd called Uncle Richard daily for 2 years. Visitor logs from cardiology appointments showing I'd attended all 17 appointments while no other family member attended any. Testimony from Uncle Richard's cardiologist stating that Richard had been completely mentally competent until his final week. Testimony from 3 neighbors stating they'd only ever seen me visiting, never other family members except once a year at Christmas. He had receipts for medications I'd purchased. Grocery receipts for food I'd bought him. Receipts for the home health aide I'd hired out of my own pocket when Uncle Richard got too weak to manage alone. He had Uncle Richard's letter written in his own hand, explaining his decision clearly and rationally. Judge Fisher reviewed everything silently. Then she spoke. "I've practiced law for 35 years, she said. I've overseen hundreds of will contests. Most of them involve legitimate concerns. Questions about mental competency, suspicious circumstances, unclear intent. This is not one of those cases." She looked at Melissa. "Ms. Morrison, your uncle left a clear, documented explanation of his decision. He was evaluated by a physician and found competent. He had the right to leave his assets to whomever he chose." "But she manipulated," Melissa started. "No," Judge Fisher interrupted. "She visited him. There's a difference. A significant one." He turned to me. "Ms. Chen, the evidence shows you provided consistent, loving care to your uncle for years. You did so while working full-time as a nurse. You did so without any apparent expectation of inheritance. Your uncle valued that care. He chose to reward it. That was his right." Back to Melissa. "If you had wanted to inherit, you should have been present in his life. That's not manipulation on your niece's part. That's consequence." She banged her gavel. "Contest denied. Richard Chen's will stands as written. Furthermore, given the weakness of this case and the clear evidence against it, I'm awarding Ms. Emma Chen her legal fees, to be paid by the contesting party." Mr. Hartwell leaned over and whispered, "That's $12,000 they now owe you." Melissa stood abruptly and walked out, her face red. Outside the courtroom, Mom and Dad were waiting. "You're really going to let them make us pay?" Mom asked. "I didn't make that decision. The judge did. You could waive it. Show some family compassion." "No," I said. "You chose to contest the will. You lost. These are the consequences." I walked away from them for the second time. 6 months after Uncle Richard's death, the estate cleared probate. I took possession of the house, the bank accounts, the investments, $3.2 million. I sat in Uncle Richard's house, my house, on a Tuesday evening drinking coffee like we used to. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Uncle Richard had wanted me to build the life I deserve. I thought about what that meant. I called Mr. Hartwell. "I want to set up a scholarship fund for nursing students who are first-generation college students working their way through school. $50,000 a year. That's very generous. Uncle Richard paid for his own college by working construction. He'd appreciate this. I'll set it up. And $100,000 to cardiac research. In his name." I made my decisions over the following weeks. I moved into the Ballard bungalow with its memories of Tuesday evenings. I enrolled in a nurse practitioner program at the University of Washington. 2 years part-time, no loans needed. I hired a gardener to restore Uncle Richard's garden to how it looked when he tended it. The scholarship fund's first recipient was a 22-year-old single mother. She cried when I told her. I cried too. My family didn't speak to me for months. Then Kyle texted, "Hey, can we talk?" We met at a coffee shop. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "I was angry, jealous. But you didn't steal anything. You earned it." What changed? I realized I can't remember a single real conversation with Uncle Richard. Every time I saw him, I was on my phone. I didn't care about him. I just cared about what he could give me. We talked for an hour. Really talked. "I don't know if Mom and Dad will come around," Kyle said. "Or Melissa. But I'm glad Uncle Richard left everything to you. You deserved it." A year after Uncle Richard's death, Dad called. "Emma, I'm calling to apologize. Your mother and I were wrong. We were angry because we felt entitled. But we didn't earn it. You did." His voice cracked. "I called Richard 4 times a year. Saw him once. I told myself that was enough. But we weren't close. We were just related. You had a real relationship with him. That's my failure, not yours. I loved him, Dad. I know. And he loved you. I'm sorry for how we treated you. For not seeing what you were doing. For being angry instead of proud. I forgive you. But I'm not giving back the money. I know. And I'm not asking. That money is yours. Richard wanted you to have it. I respect that now. Mom called 2 days later with a more difficult apology. He was trying. Melissa never apologized. 2 years of silence. Then a cancer scare brought us to the hospital. I visited with flowers. Why are you here? She asked. Because you're my sister. And because I'm a nurse. And because I know how scary this is. We both cried. It was a start. 3 years after Uncle Richard's death, I completed my nurse practitioner degree. I took a job at a cardiology clinic specializing in heart failure patients, the same condition Uncle Richard had. I helped patients understand their medications, their prognosis. I made sure no one faced their diagnosis alone. It felt like honoring Uncle Richard's memory. I still lived in his house. On Tuesday evenings I'd sit on the porch with coffee and talk to him about my week, my patients, my life. The scholarship fund had helped 12 students. 3 graduated and became nurses. They sent thank you cards with photos in their scrubs. Uncle Richard would have loved that. My family relationships slowly healed. Dad and I talked every few weeks. Mom was trying. Kyle and I rebuilt something real. Melissa and I worked on it over coffee. It would never be perfect. But it was something. I thought about Uncle Richard's gift often. Not just the money but what it represented. Someone had seen me. Had valued me. Had loved me. He'd given me the knowledge that I was worth showing up for. That my time mattered. That my care mattered. That I mattered. That was the real inheritance. The money was just proof.